Welcome back to all of those of you who have been part of the Uni Food Day since the beginning this morning. And also a big welcome to those of you who are checking in now, because this session is of your interest. You indeed have checked in on Uni Food Day at the session number 2. I'd like to share a slide actually to support what I'm saying here. Right, you have joined in for session number 2, in which we are extremely lucky to have with us today Leonore Bonafou from IFF, the multinational ingredient company. We also have with her 3 panelists from science. We have Grete Hyldig, who's the leader of the sensory group at DTU. We have Associate Professor Ulla Kidmose from Aarhus University with us, and Professor Wenda Breddy is joined in from University of Copenhagen as well. I am really pleased that in a few minutes we will be opening up for a discussion on the off flavors in plant-based products, which is a question we will be discussing with a little more detail. But I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer a survey first. So please take out your mobile phones, use the QR code. I did test it myself and it did work yesterday. I'll see if it will work again. I'm taking out my mobile phone now and getting close to the slide, opening it up and tapping in exactly what comes to my mind when I think about off flavors in plant-based foods. And when you've seen this, 1 minute, I'll be swapping to another screen so that you can also see the results as they come in. I'm posting now my thoughts on this. And let's have a look at what all of the audience is actually answering here. We have some interesting options coming up here. I'll just give you 1 more minute. Perhaps there are a few participants that would still like to participate. If you have problems using the QR code, you can always join in via your browser, slido.com, and there you can use the code that is at the lower left level of the screen to figure out or to find our survey, and then you can type in what it is you think of when you hear the words off flavors in plant-based foods. And you can actually type in as many words as you would like. So if more things are coming up, or you actually you forgot something, or you wanted to add an extra, you can still do so. There are 28 answers. I think we should have a little more considering the amount of people that we are in here, but it's okay. I'm not sure everyone was prepared to bring out their phone, because I only mentioned it to those that were part of the first session in which we were discussing precision fermentation with Nestlé, and 3 scientists that from each their perspective were bringing some knowledge on both the economical aspects, the production aspects, and not the least how the consumers perceive these new types of foods. Consumers are also important when we are discussing the off flavors in food. So that's exactly what we are trying to open up for now. Still people typing in. I think we will go back to this word cloud as we go along. So I'll just share another picture again to introduce the panelists. The first speaker will be Leonore Bonafou, who is joining us from Denmark somewhere. Actually, I'd like both you, Grete, and Ulla and Wenda, to also open up your cameras so that we know you are there and you can say hello. Hi, Grete.
Hello.
And Ulla, you will have to find your camera if you put your cursor over your slide to the upper left, up here somewhere. If you take your cursor up there, you can find your camera and you can turn on your camera, or at the bottom of your screen. Okay, it seems we will have another 2 breaks, a 2 minutes break. We will just have to find our speakers and make sure that we are all online. So you will have a 2 minutes break, and we will be back in a minute. Hello, Wender, good to see you.
Hello, Heidi. Good morning.
Morning. And now I think Ulla should be on her way as well. Can we hear you, Ulla? Ulla, it's fine. We will move ahead. I'm sure you will be there, and you know the question already, so we will move ahead while we are watching the word cloud. Leonor, would you like me to show the word cloud first, or show your slides first?
No, the word cloud is okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe we can. Yeah.
Maybe you can introduce yourself then.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, Heidi. So first, I would like to thank Food and Bio Cluster for giving me the opportunity to discuss about this very interesting topic with my peers. I'm Leonor Bonafous. I'm working at IFF as a PX, Product Experience Senior Researcher on the Global Innovation Program. And the Reimaging program is one of our innovation program to support plant-based alternative growing. And what we see is that clearly a plant-based alternative is a key pillar for our future. So maybe you can share my slide now. Heidi, do you share my slide? Great, thanks. So indeed, at IFF, we think that plant-based, it's an opportunity because clearly there is a constant growing demand. Nearly 50% of consumers globally are cutting down on animal products without going on vegan diet. So there is really here a need to fulfill. So in this context, industries such as IFF really have to deliver some good and nutritious without compromising on taste and texture, with also feeding the environmental benefits. In the other hand, we still face some big challenge regarding the taste. So it's still one of the top 3 barrier of consuming this plant-based alternative. So I'm very happy to see a little bit what you raise as word in your mind when it comes to off flavor. It can be bitter, it can be green, it can be non-pleasant, etc. So indeed, in this context, the plant-based can be described as off, such the beanie, the bitterness, the astringent. I'm trying to take, yeah, perfect. Oh, too fast. So the last slide, talking about off flavor. So what come off flavor? For me, first, I would like to understand why do we describe it as off? Are they really off? And what does it mean off? And how to describe it? Is it indeed this beanie, but maybe in other parts or other products we do not perceive as beanie? So how to describe it? Are they well accepted by consumer? We see already some of your words that are not very, some are positive, some are negative regarding the acceptance, but also how, what are the acceptance globally? Maybe we have different acceptance of this beanie, which are not perceived anymore as off, but more as just a flavor. And if they are not well accepted, how can we reduce them in order to make it more accepted? So I will let my peers to try to a little bit discuss and answer some of these questions around the off flavor in plant-based.
And luckily for us, Leonor, thank you so much for bringing the questions. And luckily enough, we found all the speakers and they are quite hot shots. So I think I am happy to introduce the 3 speakers from DTU, from Aarhus University and from University of Copenhagen that will take us through different aspects of how to work with the off flavors or discuss the off flavors experienced in plant-based foods. First of all, I'm happy to give the word to Grete Hyldig from DTU. You are the leader of the sensory group in the research group for bioactives. You work with analysis and application, and you're specialized in sensory sciences and responsible for the sensory lab. And here we go. We will share your presentation and hand over the control to you. If anything goes wrong, we will help each other to figure out and continue anyways. Thank you so much, Grete, and the word is yours.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this very interesting topic, because it is very interesting when you are dealing with ingredients in total, and of course, especially when we are talking about the plant-based ingredients. So I'm just... Yeah. So when you are talking about sensory quality, of course, it's not only the flavor or the taste, it's also the appearance and the odor and the texture, and it all comes in a way for the consumers when they are consuming the product. So for the consumer, it's the whole package, you can say. And I know I give you also some examples from microalgae and seaweed. And I know this is not plant, but it is in the same area as the plant-based and the ingredients from there. And here is an example of when you are working with microalgae, and you can see here we have made some ingredients from the microalgae and use them in bread. And you can see the 2 portion of dough, and the one here at the behind is more green. So even when you are making an ingredients and think that you would like to take out a certain compound of your raw material, and here it was protein, then you also take other things with you, and you can see here it is a green color. So, and when you bake the bread, the green color is a little less visual, but it's still there. And what we also experienced, we didn't make a consumer test on this one, but many of our colleagues was really commenting on the color. So when you have seen the bread and you see the green color, you already think about how it would taste and so on. And that can also affect what you are thinking of as off flavors, what you expect. So and the next example is also from the seaweed, and here it is the odor attributes, and you can see here we have the sweet, we have fresh sea, and we have rubber. We have beach cast, which is more hay-like and sourish, and boiled peas, and umami, and metal. So many of these odors are quite common in many of the seaweed species, but when you are using and making ingredients from this, you take also many of these attributes with the ingredients and put them into other products. And what will the consumers say about that? Because I mean, rubber and boiled pea is maybe not the combination that you would expect in a product. So, but for instance, rubber odor in a place or a turbot is really a characteristic odor for these fish species. So, and if we go further, we have a project where we are working with ingredients from potatoes, and here, of course, it's the side streams from the potato industry, and here we had taken out the proteins, and here is an example where we tried to ferment these solution of proteins. And as you can see, here we have also the cereal in the odor and also in the taste, and you have this almond and sweet, and here for sure the appearance is an off, because when you look at it, you will expect that it tastes awful, or many consumers would expect that. The taste was not very okay, but the texture was really very odd. So so the off flavors is not only the taste or the odor, it is also texture and appearance. We also worked with without fermentation and looked into these proteins from the potato made in an ingredients. And as you can see here, we have bitter, umami, astringent, and cold tea, and this is the flavor attributes. And this has been analyzed with a trained tested sensory panel. And you can see that the bitterness is quite high in some of them, but you also have the umami, and that is very positive. And I saw that in the word cloud that the missing umami was one of the things that someone thought about when thinking about all flavors. But there is quite many of our plant or plant-based ingredients where we actually can get the umami. But the astringency, and that was also one of the words in the word cloud, can be very high. Also, we saw it in these ingredients. So, of course, this will depend on the content of the ingredient in the final product, how much these will come into play when you have the final product. We had made some consumer studies several times where we are asking the consumers which type of information that they really want to have. And We ask them here. It is from an EU project where we have asked consumers from Italy and from Denmark. And as you can see here, that quite many consumers actually want to know what is in the food that they buy. Of course, as also we saw in one of the first speakers this morning, that there is these different groups of consumers, and that will always be like that. There is consumers that doesn't care any at all. So, but here you can see there's quite many consumers that actually want to know what's in the food. And when we are asking if they actually read the labels that are on the food products, many of them actually do, and they want to have this information about the content. And in the respect here for talking about ingredients, more interesting is that they actually want to know the origin of each ingredients. And we have seen that in several of the consumer studies that we have done, that it's not enough to know the origin of the majority of the product which they are buying. They also want to know something about the ingredients. So the consumers, they want to have this information. And then I want to round up with a question and come with a comments on that, because do the consumers know what to expect? And these on the picture here is some emulsions from our potato studies. So these are dressings made from these potato side streams. Many times we are seeking to make new substitutes for something. And when you are making a substitute, then the consumer would actually expect that the product will taste and smell and have the taste as the one that you are substituting. So maybe it's very fine to have here in these emulsions that they are a little more bitter and maybe have a little more astringency, if you really know that this is a case, because you can use them in a salad where you maybe have a lot more sweetness than and not these bitter salad types. So in the total meal, this will give very much sense that these dressings are more bitter than you would expect from a normal dressing. So maybe we also should be very much better to inform the consumers what to expect. So this was what I wanted to bring up here today, and for sure this is a very important topic when we are talking about all type of products. So yes.
Thank you so much, Grete, and thank you for taking in the consumer and the real reaction in what's going on when they meet the foods for this discussion. Now I'm happy to hand over the microphone to Ulla Kidmose, who is specialized in research on sensory perception, consumer acceptance, as well as sensory quality of both plant-based and animal products. And you are joining us here from Aarhus University. Welcome on board, Ulla, and here goes your presentation without further delay.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation to present today, Heidi. Really nice that I could connect. I had some problems, but it succeeded in the end, so that was good.
We're happy you're here.
Thank you. What I'm going to talk about today is the expectations of the consumers and how they interpret the flavors, if they are flavor or off flavors in different plant-based products. Will you shift the slides? Can I do it? Thank you. So if a flavor is considered as a flavor or off flavor, it depends on many different factors. And we could see on the wordle that some of the off flavor you mentioned was bitter and carbon and grainy and hay and beany. And I think it depends very much on, or the most important factors are the consumer segments and also the food product and the familiarity with the flavor. So if we start with the consumer segments, you are probably a group of very diverse segments. So it's the reason why a lot of different off flavors came up in the wordle. So if you are a vegan or vegetarian, then you are you might not have experienced the taste of the flavor of meat of the animal products, and then you will not consider the flavors that are present in plant-based food as an off flavor because you are very used to it. In contrast, if you are a flexitarian or a sustainable consumer that would like to change their dietary habits towards a more plant-based diet, then you might eat a lot of plant-based, animal products still. And then you are used to these flavors that are present in the animal counterpart. And then you'll consider the very unique flavors that are present in the plant-based product as off flavor. So I think it depends very much on the consumer segment who you are looking at, if a flavor will be considered as a flavor or an off flavor. We did a survey in about Danish consumers regarding their preference for plant-based cheese. And as you can see on the slide, we found that approximately 50% of the consumers, they would like to have the same flavor or the same texture as dairy cheese. So they are probably belonging to the flexitarian group. So it depends on the consumer segment. It also depends on the food product. As you can see on the picture, the picture to the right is meat products, and it is possible to make almost the same kind of product as plant-based products. So if you are buying some of these plant-based products, then you will probably expect that the taste or the flavor or the texture will be almost the same as the animal counterpart, the meat products. So it depends on the food product. If it's some unique plant-based product like falafel or chili con carne, then you will expect that they taste of chickpeas or have a beany taste or flavor, and then it will not be experienced. It will not be considered as an off flavor in these kind of products. And the product is very much linked to familiarity of the flavor. So if you are eating falafel again, then you will expect that there will be a high intensity of chickpea flavor. But if you eat a plant-based burger or cheese, then you would consider the flavor as an off flavor if there is some chickpea flavor in it. And that will relate to the liking of the products. The next slide, please. The sale of plant-based food is increasing significantly recently. And the food categories that are sold most is meat and dairy products. As I said before, at the moment, it looked like many of the consumers would like to have products that mimic the animal counterpart for these food categories. Maybe in the future, there will be more unique products sold that not necessarily has to mimic the animal counterpart. The next slide, please. The ingredients that are used in plant-based food is very different from what are the protein source in animal food. So the protein source in many plant-based food are soy protein or pea or fava beans or oat or chickpeas or lentil proteins. And all these protein sources in plant-based food, they have a very unique flavor that is unfamiliar compared to the animal counterpart, because there's some other proteins present in meat and cheese, for example. The next one, please. And these ingredients, they definitely influence the quality of the flavor of the product. We made a study some years ago with plant-based burgers, where we investigated 4 different prototypes and also compared them to 2 commercial plant-based prototypes and then a meat product. We did a sensory study with a trained panel where they evaluated the different attributes on a 15 centimeter scale, going from low intensity to high intensity. And what you can see on this slide is that the prototypes are placed opposite to the meat product. And the prototypes have a very high intensity of beanie and chickpea flavor and odor, and also bready and whole grain odor and flavor. So some of the same attributes you mentioned as off flavor in the wordle. In contrast, the meat has a very high intensity of meat, beef odor and flavor. So if the consumers expect that they should taste and appear in the same way as a meat product, then there's definitely some off flavors in these plant-based burgers. The next one, please. And that is also true for cheese, plant-based cheese. We developed 4 different plant-based cheese prototypes and compared them with a Danbo 30% using a trained sensory panel, and they evaluated the different attributes from 0 to 15 with low intensity to high intensity. And what you can see on these in this table, then the dairy and cheesy flavor, as well as the bitter flavor, is very high in the Danbo 30% cheese, in contrast to the prototypes. So you mentioned bitter as a off flavor, but actually it's not an off flavor in a real Danbo cheese, but it will be a off flavor in a plant-based product, maybe another one than the cheese. In contrast, the nutty seed off flavor and the beanie flavor is much higher in the prototypes compared to the Danbo cheese. So again, if you expect that it will taste like the animal counterpart, then you will maybe get a bit disappointed and consider these flavors as off flavor. The last slide, please. So the take-home message is that whether flavor or plant-based products are considered as a flavor or a off flavor, it will definitely depend on the consumer segment or the individual consumers. It depend on the product and if the product should mimic the animal counterpart, and then it also relates to familiarity of the specific flavor. Thank you. That was the last slide, I think, Heidi. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ulla. So bringing the discussion of what is actually considered off flavor in opposition to an expected flavor. And I think actually Wender is going to talk a little more about this as well. Wender Brady, you are with us from University of Copenhagen. You are the head of research group, the Sensory Science and Consumer Behavior at the food department. And you're an expert on flavor, product perception, and food preferences. Why don't you, without any delay, take over the presentation as well as the microphone. Here we go.
Okay, thank you, Heidi, for your introduction. And yes, I think I'll just straight on get into my talk. So if you could give me the next slide, please. Because when we're looking at this topic of flavor and off flavor, I think it's maybe good to sort of refresh a little bit of what we see as a flavor actually, because flavor is sort of a composed sensory attribute, you can say, or a set of attributes where we have at least 3 systems that contribute to this perception. And often we think it's a taste, but there's actually in off flavors, we also see a large contribution of odor, or the sense of smell in our nose. And also when we're thinking about plant-based foods and also some of the attributes that have been mentioned in the word cloud, you can also maybe see some of the pungency and other kind of like a little bit sharpness of flavors, and they are sensed by the trigeminal system that we have both in our nose and in our mouth and also around our eyes. And so when we're thinking about off flavors, and if you could give the next click, please, Heidi, then we sometimes also think like, okay, it's other things, but then we see in plant-based foods, we have also something associated with flavor, and that is the mouthfeel properties. And then sometimes in these plant-based foods, also some of the mouthfeel properties are not considered desirable, like for instance, astringency and mouth drying, other kind of aspects. But that's an other sensing system that we have primarily in our mouth. So if you're thinking about off flavor, and if you could give me the next click, please, then you could sort of look at off flavor as, okay, in this total system, that we see that something is deviating from our expectation. So if you have a standard food, could be a dairy product or a meat product or something like that, and if you want to mimic that, then an off flavor could be that it is deviating from what we expect to be in such a product. And also off flavors could be more at an extreme level, is when something is perceived as unpleasant, or even more extreme as disgusting. So when it's really off because it has been rotten or other kind of things. So to me, these are sort of the at least 2 main things when we're dealing with off flavor. So in my group, we are really looking into off flavor more from an analytical point of view, and also what we can do, of course, about this in plant-based foods. So if you can give me the next slide, please. Then when we're dealing with plant-based foods, then if you're looking at all the kind of products that we have, and this is only just an example of the kind of flavors that we see in these raw materials, is actually quite diverse. And there's also a lot of components that contribute to off flavors, and sometimes we know them. And actually also I think there's still a lot to be discovered. Because when we're thinking about beanie flavor or about bitterness, we have some kind of a hinge as to what it could be. But I think there's also still a lot to be discovered as what is really the causing components, and also the combinations of components that contribute to these off sensations. So what we are working on, and if you can give me the next slide, we are working on different products, and I just give today an example of a project that we are working on with several partners in Denmark to actually looking into different kind of legumes and oat varieties, because when we're thinking about the primary production, we often selection has been made on the yield of the grains or of the seeds, and when we are thinking about incorporating this into foods or alternative foods to animal-based foods, then we have not really considered what are the flavor properties in these varieties, and we actually don't know. When we're talking people in the primary production, they say like, well, yes, we know this is a good variety, it grows well in the Danish climate, but we actually don't really know about the flavor potential or the flavor properties in this and the variation. So in this project, we're looking into 30 different varieties where we're just looking a little bit onto the flavor potential and also on the off flavors in these kind of raw materials. So if you could give me the next slide, please. This is just an example on how we are working on this, is that we are making from these seeds, we're making protein concentrates. And then in these protein concentrates, we are looking into, with our sensory panel, sort of the taste properties and the flavor properties and mouthfeels. But at the same time, also we are interested to see what is the chemical basis or what sort of the underlying components that give these kind of sensations. And what we observe, especially in this green peas, is that when you're looking into the raw material and also in the concentrates, they're quite bitter, which has also been mentioned as in the word cloud. But also we have this beanie of flavor. But when we're looking also into these raw materials, then normally if you want to use them into a process, then you're actually going to apply heat to the system. So we're actually also looking into these systems, into sort of the thermally generated flavors and what they can do maybe to masking some of these off flavors, but also the thermal process is also doing something, for instance, with some of these bitter components, because they're not stable in a heating process. So it is really a complex matter to investigate this and looking into the potential. But what we see so far is actually that when we're looking at all these varieties that we're screening, that there are some differences. So there's actually important to think about the selection also in the primary production, that actually all the selections you make there is actually all the way going down in the food value chain and also to what you then can serve on the plate for the consumer. Can I have the next slide, please? So what we are having as a new technique in our laboratory is to look into the off flavors in terms of the volatile components, because often, as I mentioned, aromas are quite important, and the deviations of the aromas can give these kind of off flavors. And off flavors can be defined sometimes as just a single component in the mixture that can give you the off flavor. And sometimes, as maybe with the beanie off flavor, it could be a set of different components that can cause this kind of off flavor. And normally, we would look at this like, okay, making an extract of the matrix and then analyzing it by a mass spectrometer, and then also having a sniffing port where we can have an assessor evaluating the odors of the individual components. And this is a very classical technique, what have been applied for many years. But we have some challenges because sometimes we cannot really look into the details of what are the odors and the corresponding components that we can identify, because there's an overlap of components. So what we have done now is that we have a new technique. If I can get the next slide, please, is that we run so-called a dual system. So in this system is that we can run the analysis on one kind of column where we can separate the odor on this compound, but we can actually also take so-called hard cuts, where we can then take part of the chromatogram and bring that onto a new column and separate the components. And in that way, we can really get a very exact separation of the components and have, in the combination with the odor port assessment, we can get really an insight as to what are the particular components, odorants that can give or can be responsible for the off flavors. If I can get the next slide, please. Because here's an example how that works. So we can take out of the chromatogram, for instance, here in the, it can be seen here on the on the right side of the picture here, there we can see that we have the components that are not separated. So if we take them out of the chromatogram and run them down on the second column, we can actually get a really good separation of the components, and thereby we can, with our sniffing analysis, we can actually really see what are the components that gives the flavor. Now, that is one thing, that's a tool that is very nice when you use this for looking into individual components, but often, as I said, flavors and off-flavors can be a combination of different components. And in our system, we have developed a system where we can also add the components together again and then have an odor assessment. So if I can get the next slide, please. This is an example where we have made 2 hard cuts in the chromatogram. So we have, like in the first region, have selected some components, and then later on in the chromatogram, we have combined them with some of the pyrazines. And this is an example of coffee, but we are at the moment setting this system up for our screening studies on off-flavors. But here it's just to see, like, okay, when we bring them together, we can then evaluate them as like one peak in our chromatogram, and then again make an odor assessment. So we can, in this new system that we can have a very precise separation of components, but we actually also can do recombination studies. And in that way, we hope to get sort of a better insight as to what are the chemical components that can give off flavors in these plant-based foods. So if I can get to the last slide, please. So when we're looking into off flavors, we are very much into the analytical part of this. So we're trying to use with sensory panels to get an idea of the description of the kind of properties for the off flavors. But then we are also have an analytical laboratory where we can really separate these components and trying to get insight into the chemical components that are responsible for the off flavors. And of course, it's really a challenge in the coming years to really get a good idea as to what are these off flavors, both in the raw materials, what's the influence of the processing, and also what's happening during storage of these new plant-based foods, so that we get a better insights in both of the off flavors, the bitter components, and also, you can say, in the mouthfeel properties of these new foods. So with that, I would like to give back the word to you again, Heidi, to start the discussion.
Thank you so much, Wender. Thank you so much for taking us through some of the technologies that you're using and the methodologies you're using to analyze and discover the flavor components. It all becomes a matter of when you prioritize what. It seems, Leonore, what kind of analysis you want to use for what, but with a special focus on the purpose that you have. What is it really that you want to gain from your analysis? Actually, I have a few questions to all of you with regards to what you have presented in explanatory questions. No, especially to Ulla Kidmose, you introduced a study for us on 500 consumers. That is right. So you're bringing brand new science to the table. When will this be publicly available?
I think very soon. I expect very soon. We have conducted the survey and collected the data, so we are ready to publish them. Yep.
We will follow closely. Thank you so much. I had one more question to you, though. You showed us a graph with the preferences on, or what is being bought actually, what are consumers purchasing, in which meat and drink were very big, but I didn't find any mixed products or ready-to-eat products. Are they integrated in these graphs, or is the amount of those sold so small it's out of the graph?
No, it's only what you can call pure products. So it's only if it's meat or a special dairy. It's not where you have mixed different ingredients as a meal in itself.
So it doesn't count sausages or chili sin carne, for instance?
I'm not sure. I think it will include sausages. But you know, if you make a complete meal, then it's not included.
All right, thank you for the clarification. Yeah, no, actually, I think we should jump on to Leonor. We only have 10 minutes left for the discussion, but Leonor, you might have your own questions to all of the speakers.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great. I will take a really broad question for all of the three and give their view on the future. Are we going to mimic more, or are we going to reintroduce more the, as you say, Ula, the falafel, etc.? So I'm quite curious, how do you see the future of plant-based alternative?
Ola, you have your hand raised, yeah.
I think the future will be that you will create more unique products, plant-based products, because I think when you have converted the consumers into a more plant-based consumer, then they will look for some new products instead of products that mimic the one that they already know. So I think the future will show a lot of unique products that are plant-based instead of mimicking already existing animal products. A good example is 20 years ago, I think, or maybe more, there was nothing called falafel, and nobody ate falafel in Denmark. But nowadays, falafel is very common because they have been introduced and they have been a part of our diet, and we have get familiar to these kind of products. And I think it will also happen in the future with some new unique products, maybe from other cultures, that will be introduced as a part of our diet.
The rest of you are nodding. Anything you want to add on this? Grete?
Yes, and also time will kind of help these type of products. I mean, the young people, they are more into plant-based than the old generation. So when they are becoming, older and having children, they will introduce. So that will be more also that you actually, because when you have tasted these different types of product also when you were a child, they will be more familiar, as Ulla say, and they will be more, you know, yeah, this is how we are doing it, and this is the type of product that we are buying. But I also think that some of these issues is actually also coming from that quite many consumers, or at least a rather large group of Danish consumers, don't know exactly how to switch ingredients when they are cooking their meal. So if they should implement a plant-based ingredients, if it doesn't stand in the recipe they are working with, they will be confused, and can I do this, and what should I do instead, and so on. So for helping the plant-based product and ingredients, I think that it will also be very useful in the future to go and teach the consumers more about how you actually are putting together a recipe and how you can change ingredients in a recipe.
Thank you, Grete. Wenda, you were also nodding. You had a perspective.
No, yes, I totally agree with Ulla and with Grete. I think if I look at the news in Denmark, it's really like a push for eating less, you can say beef and meat. So we can eat a little bit chicken and pork, I think. We can also still eat a little bit of beef, but there the consumption has to really be reduced. but it is also among the meat that is also most desirable often. People like to barbecue, and there's a lot of desirable properties to that. I think that's still a challenge, and also because the industry then says, okay, let's mimic that or get close to that, because then we can replace that. But I think as it's seen so far, it's very difficult to do that. So it is, I think, going in a way that you say, okay, you can still eat meat, but maybe reduce it or have the occasions less frequent, and then come with some good alternatives, but then still cover this kind of savoriness that you often see with meat, because it gives a certain kind of satisfaction, and it shows that consumers really like that. So you need to still work on that, but then maybe not trying to mimic exactly the existing products, but then trying to create a new space for these products, and that will take some time for consumers to understand. And as also said in the beginning of this talk, if you look at, for instance, beaniness could be an off flavor, but it could also be a desirable property. It depends on your perspective on how you look at it. And consumers have to learn to appreciate sort of the potential in the flavors of plant materials in that way. And I think a good example of that is in restaurant Nome, that has worked for 20 years on this, trying to look at the gastronomic potential of the Nordic raw materials, and try to really move a little bit, I think, in the food scene also in Denmark, in terms of how consumers view products today. And I think still within that sector also there could be still a positive contribution to learn people to appreciate sort of the naturalness of these plant-based foods and the kind of flavors that belong to them. So I completely agree with Gret and Ulla that there's, I think, a lot of potential for the future. And the challenge is really to see, like, okay, how can we get this kind of savoriness that we still have a little bit towards the meat? That's a bit of my take on this.
Wonderful, thank you. With my words, I think I would rephrase that into make vegetables cool, and the chefs will help us make vegetables and legumes cool. On the other hand, it's not a bad idea to be a company that is accommodating the situations in which people are eating, the eating situations such as barbecue as an example, and to provide an alternative which might not have off flavors or flavors that may with time become desirable. Thank you so much. Actually, there are some nice questions from the audience, and I hope that we can have time to just take the two of them. One is more of a comment that I think is very quick. We can go quickly through. Maybe we should stop calling the products cheese and meat, and these names give special expectations. Instead, we should rather describe the products as they should be expected to be used, like dip, paste, topping, and so on. What is your comment to that, Ola?
You are not allowed to call them cheese or meat, so you have to find some alternative phrasing for them. So I think it's a nice way, you know, to make some unique names for them. So it could be something with dip, and then introduce what is in the dip on the packets. So definitely, I don't think we should call them cheese and meat because you are not allowed to do that.
Thank you.
If I can add something, it's a little bit challenging because also when you create something that is different, that's what they know, they are lost. So having something that they know, indeed it creates an expectation, but it makes also a certain comfort that they know what it is. So it's in between. It's a little bit challenging to not use the words that they are using frequently in their vocabulary and they know by heart, and creating also an expectation towards sensorial attributes. So
indeed, communication with the consumer is part of the whole negotiation about what the flavor should be like. One last question that I think Wenda can answer very, very quickly, or perhaps you can even answer that in the chat. Yeah, I think if you don't mind, Wenda, to look into the chat. I would like to comment to that. There is a question regarding the electronic nose and so on. When I saw your slides, Wenda, I was thinking, wow, it looks expensive. And I also thought it looks complex. So if I were to do this, I would probably ask you to do it for me. And this is where I'd like to just suggest all of you that are participating today, if there are any of the slides you see or any of the technologies that you would like to know more about, don't hesitate to reach out to the speakers, because I'm sure they can help you to figure out how you can access much of the equipment being used at the universities today is accessible for companies, often supported with soft funding that we might be able to help you to find. Yes. Actually, we're 1 minute over time. I can't believe we're already through session number 2, but I think it's been really, really interesting to hear your the science that is that you're working on this field, and to hear how complex it is, also from your perspective, Leonor. Thank you so much to all 3 of you, or all 4 of you. In only 14 minutes, we will have to go on with the last session of today. And that will be with Tetra Pak processing, introducing a question on precision fermentation. And I'm looking forward to taking up the aspects of precision fermentation, as we also discussed in the first session today. Now we will have much more focus on the sustainability aspects of it. So now there is a break for everyone to stretch your legs, grab an extra cup of coffee or whatever.